You're listening to the Breakaway Wealth Podcast, the show that helps you build wealth faster, think outside the box, and break out of the herd. Here's your host, Jim Oliver. Welcome back, Breakaway Wealth. I'm your host, Jim Oliver, and with me today, Robert White is my guest. Robert, welcome.
Hey, Jim. Great to be with you and with your listeners.
Yeah, Robert, before we dive in, you're like in one of my favorite areas in the whole world, out in Denver. And my son still lives in Denver, kind of towards Fiddler's Green over there. And, you know, I spent most of my adult life in Denver and just love it. I always think about the misperception of things, right? People always think Denver has horrible winters, but as we just talked about, they actually have great winters. And the you know, there's no humidity there. It's like a high desert, which people don't realize. But before we get started, I just wanted to say that. But also, Robert, introduce yourself to people. Tell us a little bit about you, a little bit about your background and what you do now.
Well, a piece of my background is actually connected to the Denver connection. And that is, you know, I've spent 23 years of my working life abroad, living in Japan or Hong Kong or mainland China. But when I left Japan after the first 12-year stay there, I only had two rules. Number one was a good airport, you know, because I knew I wanted to stay busy and be returning to Asia where most of my business was. And but the other reason was I was looking for low humidity, which is probably why I'm not joining you in Florida, by the way. But now the women complain about Colorado and these Western states because of their skin and moisture and, you know, all of that stuff. But it is, you know, the fable is that there's 300 days of sunshine a year. It's actually not true, by the way, but close to
It's
that.
not? I didn't know that. I always say that.
It's like many of those urban legends, but it's close to that. That blue sky is there. Those mountains are there to look at. It's inspiring, and the low humidity. But my background is I'm old enough for that story to take up the entire podcast, and my own story has become boring to me, so that's not so good. I grew up in, you know, if I'm the full self-disclosure, in poverty and abuse. And studying that over the years, not just myself, but other people, there are many people that grow up in less than ideal circumstances. I'm just one of them. But what I've noticed is people tend to take one or two paths with that background. One is retreat. They retreat into silence or kind of a hidden life, or alcohol or drugs, or a lot of dysfunctional behaviors, or they get some combination of angry or clear or something. And I realized that we do a lot of work with purpose with executive clients, and my early purpose was very clear. I'll never be poor again. And that kind of a statement of purpose lacks a lot of things like joy and satisfaction. But I made a lot of money with that purpose. I was very driven. And so I always had a little entrepreneurial job growing up. At 17 years old, I was the highest rated radio show in the state of Wisconsin and made more money than my father had ever made. I graduated at a class of 300, number 6, and with labeled the most likely to succeed. You know, all of those kinds of things. I was driven very much so. And but two pieces about that is that number one, my father had died when I was 14, and my family moved back to the South, and I grew up with another family in Green Bay, Wisconsin. A real blessing in my life. And so after I graduated, I was a commencement speaker, of course. And then I called my mother, which in those years, a telephone call, long distance phone call was a big deal. And I called my mother, and I think about it now. I don't know what excuse I had for calling her then, but I know now that it was to brag, you know, to get some approval from her. And her classic response after I told her all of that wonderful stuff was, well, why weren't you number one?
Ooh.
So that's what I grew up with. A lot of disapproval, a lot of shaming, a lot of negativity, a lot of criticism. But it toughened me, I think, to some extent. But 10 years later, now I'm 27. I'm broke. I've had an early marriage and divorce. I felt horribly guilty about that. A lot of self blame in that. And finally, I'd had three heart attacks at 19, 21, and
Oh,
23. And I'd been told I wouldn't live past 35. It was incurable. My life was a mess. But, of course, I'm walking around like everything's great. Everything's fine. I'm running the mail ego thing to the nth degree. And a dear friend went out to California, the land of the fruits and nuts at that time was kind of how it was known. And he went through one of the early human potential movement trainings. And the guy came back and said, you should do this, Robert. And of course, I said, tell me more about it. And he did. And I said, no way. And I'm not doing anything like that. So for 6 months, he worked on me. And in the 6 months, first of all, he had adult acne. I didn't even know that existed, but it did. And he had done all these treatments and steroids and all kinds of things. I remember one time they did like a grinder on his face, and it looked like one of those monkeys in the zoo with the red butts. You know,
yeah.
you know. And he's in sales. He's in a business similar to mine, and so his appearance mattered to him certainly. And in that 6 months, his face cleared up. He went to a training about mindset that
Mm.
didn't talk about money, didn't talk about medicine, and his face cleared up. And his relationship with his wife went from near divorce to rich and fulfilling. And his business grew and mine didn't. As I was still struggling. So I went to the training, and it's a cliche all these years later, Jim, but my life changed for the better. Not instantly, took some time, but I tripled my income in that year after that training, and it went up 10 times the second year. So I started making more money in a month than I'd ever made in a year. And just wonder, and relationships improved and all of that. So one of the things I did was I started sending people to that training. My first of all, my family and then friends, and then my sales staff, particularly. And in the training, they didn't talk about making money or business. They talked about getting me out of the way of success. And I just fell in love with the idea. And then I actually sold my little business and had an offer to go to New York City. And I went from working with 31 people in my team to working with 850 with every distributor in that tri-state area. And and I started doing weekend seminars because I couldn't do interviews anymore with 850 people. And I would bring in this training company spokesperson, one of their instructors. The company was called Mind Dynamics, one of the pioneers in that human potential movement. And I bring her in, and she'd talk for 90 minutes, and we would close. Because I didn't understand the training, but I knew it worked. And that kind of very simple approach to it. And so I enrolled over 400 people into that training over time. And not for money, just because, well, indirectly for money, because then they perform better for me. And one day the phone rings, and it's the founder and chairman of Mind Dynamics, and he introduces himself. I didn't even know his name, and invites me to come out to California. Uh, my first class flight he paid for, and 10 days later I was president of Mind Dynamics. So I did spend 4 years working for someone else, for a true genius, a visionary, not a very good businessman, but a brilliant man. And I learned the training business and got paid for learning it. I did take a 70% pay cut to do that, but uh, I got a promise of any car I ever wanted, and a bunch of nice things if I hit certain targets, which I did. And I got to travel all over the world, set up 7 foreign subsidiaries for a young guy who grew up in a small town. It was an incredible experience and learned a lot. Um, and the ownership of that company changed, didn't work for me anymore, so I quit. Founded a company called LifeSpring, which went on to have 17 training centers in the US and great success. But I only lasted 6 months in my own company. And what I learned there is maybe a bit of what we can talk about from that kind of a failure, even though LifeSpring went on and did great things. What I learned in that process is what I teach today in working with executives of growth companies. My market is the small, medium-sized company that's up to something. And I've been with even that 4 years where I worked for My Dynamics, it was really entrepreneurial because the founder didn't care about the business. He didn't just let me do whatever I wanted to do if it served people. So anyway, the one country I said no to during that My Dynamics period was Japan.
Mm,
Those people, we weren't ready for it. We were in overwhelm, and it was the most expensive market that I'd ever seen, because our training business takes a lot of space, and
mm,
space is at a premium in Japan, So, um, and the language is backwards. And the Mind Dynamics program depended a lot on a very precise use of language. So I said no. And Jim, I mean, we kind of know that about Japanese culture. They called me, faxed me, reached out to me at least monthly, and sometimes 2 or 3 times in a month. Please come, set up a program here, please come. And I was, first of all, I was with Mind Dynamics. I said, no, it's not right for us at this time. Then with LifeSpring, it's a startup. I can't go to Japan, and we got to stay close to home. And then when I left my own company, when I sold the company, and I sold it and it was totally funded by me, and I sold it for nothing down and forever to pay. And that formula it's called they took longer than forever to pay. So I'm broke. I've got a family. I've got a mortgage, and I'm broke and I'm unemployable, kind of. So, and they call me and they say, come to Japan for 90 days, and we'll pay you for 1 year.
wow.
So later, when we have hundreds of thousands of graduates in Japan, people say, "Oh, you must." And I was the first person to bring experiential learning to Japan. So people would ask this very noble question: did you come here as a fulfillment of your dream, as a expression of your purpose? You want to contribute to people? The answer was no. I came because I was broke and I needed a job, kind of, even though it was an independent contractor job. So that led to the 23 years working abroad, back and forth between living in the US and foreign, all Asian countries. And I built the largest training company in Asia and the second largest in the US, in the world. We had 240 full time people, 15 offices, training centers, and an additional 60 contract trainers. A very successful training business. At 46, I semi retired. That'll be the last piece of this little background piece for me. Is I moved to Aspen, Colorado. My friend John Denver kind of enrolled me in moving down the street from his home, and semi-retired. Took my eye off the ball, which led to me losing the company. But in the meantime, I skied 80 days a year. I traveled with John for 6 months, doing a presentation on the environment. I've met three kings and four presidents. Yeah, this is a really wonderful life, and another failure and another piece of learning, which is kind of what I bring to my clients today.
I love that. So we have a few things in common, but I think going all the way back, I grew up very poor. I've stood in line for government cheese, been homeless, all of those things. But there's one thing, Robert, that I always think about. It's and this will roll into the coaching thing and just like the mindset and getting ready, like you said. Like, how do you get ready to be successful? How do you get to where the the doubt and the negative thoughts and all this stuff that I think just plague people in the fear. I'm writing a second book, and I was working with one of the editors, and he said, "But Jim, I don't understand. Like, what's the first step that you take?" It's like, you just take a step. That's like, but it's hard to get people to take action. Is my point. But JD Rockefeller grew up super poor as well. And he, in Cleveland, Ohio, he had a vision when he was a child, a poor child, that he'd be the richest man in the world. And what's really cool about that is I didn't think that big. I was like you. I driving around, living where I lived in LA. You can go 3 miles this way, and you're you're seeing mansions. And I'm like, whoa, this is, like, I'm going to focus on money. I'm going to get rich somehow. And it wasn't get wealthy, because wealthy and rich mean two different things to me. But I was like, money, right? I'm going to figure out this money game. And I did. I wasn't very happy. But I shifted that in my mid 30s. But my point is that it's kind of like when you have to do something because you're just so, like, the pain of staying where you are is not an option, right?
Right.
Whether that's, you're gonna, like, whatever it is, get healthy, get what, your marriage. Sometimes the marriage is on the brink before you decide that, okay, you play the movie forward. I don't want that movie. Let's fix this movie. Right.
Yeah.
So I think we have a lot in common there. And that's cool, because I totally understand what you said. And the thing, one of the sayings that I hate is hurt people, because I actually believe you have two choices. Either you're going to be the person that, and I like the way you said it, the way that I say that, a similar thing is, you're either going to be that person that just doesn't give a shit about anybody else, or you care about other people so much you serve other people and you make that the focus. And you typically, the people that I see that have had trauma or abuse, they go one of those two ways, right? And I can tell by your background, you obviously went the way of helping other people and taking the things that you learned, passing it on, because that's the first thing that you said. So I love that, because I do think there is like two camps there. And obviously the people that we hang out with and talk to, they're not in the other camp, because that other camp is not something you want to associate with. But so let's talk about, when we talk about, and it's one of the hard things for me, Robert, is I see in my head how somebody can go from being the 9-to-5 slave, or the self-employed instead of the business owner. And you know what I mean by that, right? Where the business owns you. And I see them like on this brink, and they're like, well, Jim, I know, yeah, sure, I want to be financially independent. Sure, I want to be financially free, but, and you can tell me all the steps to get there, but like changing their mindset to get them ready to go. And I'm going to say one last thing, and then I'm going to let you take off with it, is I don't believe in like forming habits. I believe in making decisions. Is once you make a decision, there's no 21 days, there's no 90 days, there's none of that. It's, you make that decision. When you truly make that decision, it's over. You're going to do it, right? But the problem is most people don't ever do that. So go ahead.
Well, sure. I mean, I do a lot of the work I do with stories, a real life story.
Yeah.
So in Japan, we started, this little. I was just a contract trainer for a company that wanted to use our training, but I eventually ended that and started my own company, and we started to get some traction. And we have, our system is no salespeople, no marketing, no advertising. It's all referral based. If you like the training, you bring your friends. What had happened to me was what we were promoting with others. And we started to get some, up to about 1,000 new students a month. We're doing well. And we noticed something, and that is we had a 100% money back guarantee. And over 17 years that where we had we kept the numbers, we had a 1.7% refund rate. If you didn't like the training, just tell us, we give you the money back. Now the staff, most of our staff had the attitude that, well, most of those people, they were told by their referrer, go do the training and just tell them you don't like it, you'll get your money back. And I'm sure some of that happened. But some people didn't get the value that they wanted and or thought they were going to get. So, but that number is a very good number. If it went higher than that, if it ever reached 2% in a month, we did something about it. And if it went lower, we celebrated. And so that was like a governor, like taking the temperature of our business was that refund rate. But we noticed something else. These people are going to the same training in the same room with the same trainer, the same content, the same experiences. Now, of course, they have different experiences, but the experience is set up the same for everybody. And then they, based on their background and where they are in life, they have a different experience. But we started noticing there were people that were, yeah, they're part of the 98.3%. They like the training, but there were people going out and accomplishing things that were like unbelievable, incredible. And like I had, quite frankly, I didn't, it didn't occur to me at the time, but that was true. An example being that, I'm not a fan of Formula One.
Mm.
But I mean, I know about it, and it's exciting, and it's noisy, and the cars look very sexy, and all that. Oh, and they get the girls. That's the thing I noticed.
That's it.
Right? When you see the winner on that platform, there's always a bunch of hot women around them. And I wonder if I'm trying to think of the name of this female Indy car driver who is so attractive.
Oh,
She's so attractive. I wonder if
Dan,
a bunch of handsome guys were
yeah,
looking
yeah.
at her. Yeah, the other side of things. But uh, and I didn't meet this guy. He just came and did our trainings. Other trainers did the training for him. But he was Japan's first Formula One driver for Honda. And Honda, of course, was always been known for great engines. And at one point, they invested a lot of money in Formula One.
Mm.
And he never placed higher than 10th in a race. With these fantastic engines, fantastic cars, he did our training and he won his first Formula One race. Well, how did that happen? Because we certainly don't teach how to drive a car at 200 and whatever kilometers an hour. you know, he got
Exactly.
he got that because he got him out of the way. And but somewhere in there, we decided that we wanted to find out why do almost all people get a lot of value from our work. Why is it that some people grab the brass ring or the gold ring or whatever that metaphor is and just do fabulous things after the training? So we interviewed over 1,000 people and asked them, what is it about you such that you took this training and got results that nobody else is getting? Even though everybody's happy, or all but 1.7%. And so what we learned originally was that these people came into our training with a set of principles, and
Okay. Like
they
that.
they milked our training for everything it's worth. They got every possible piece of it. They loved it. They were the people that show up early and sat in the front row. And these were big groups, 180 to 250 people each training. And originally, we identified 5 principles, and we expanded that later to 8, and we stopped there. And so, one of the things I'll do today is I'll offer your listeners an opportunity to learn about those 8 principles, and it's free. You know,
Wow.
sign up for and I do a weekly email called the Extraordinary Minute, and some idea that I'm working on and my comments on it that could be read in 1 minute or less once a week. And but included in that is a 28-page monograph about these 8 principles. And all of them are, you already know, they are not sophisticated, they are not complicated. But to answer your question about that getting started, that choice,
Hmm.
uh, I mean, 1 through 8, and it's things like be clear about what you want and be in partnership and express yourself and participate 100%. Don't be a spectator in your own life. But number 8 is by far the most important. If you get it, you don't need the other 7, and that is commitment.
Love it.
And once you're committed to something, you'll. I mean, it's the classic. You'll march through the obstacles. You won't listen to your negative friends telling you you'll never be successful. You'll get past your patterning Like I had pretty strong patterning from my mom, the central person in my life, about how you'll never amount to anything.
Yeah.
And uh, uh, I saw a visual recently that really touched me, and it's most people are not old enough to know about this, but when I grew up, if you ordered flour or sugar or wheat, whatever, it came in cloth bags, big cloth bags. And the manufacturers found out that people were reusing those cloth bags, so they started putting patterns on them.
Mm.
I went my first 2 years of school. I went to school in clothing made from cloth from those bags, with patterns on them, and they were mostly kind of feminine bags. So you or patterns. So you can imagine the teasing and all that stuff. And that was all part of my decision. I'll never be poor again. I'll never wear those shirts again and get teased like that.
Yeah.
And so I think if people can find something to which they get madly, insanely committed, a whole lot of things clear up. That
Yeah. I
doesn't
love
change.
that.
It doesn't change your background. Doesn't change whatever limitations you have. I'm not very disciplined. I still struggle with my weight. I I've been very good at getting married and very bad at staying married. I'm not this perfect person, but because I did learn some things from my mom. I learned personal responsibility. She
Hmm.
was widowed 3 times and never
Oh,
complained.
wow.
And she worked hard. And that's the other thing. If you are not a victim, if you take responsibility for your life and you work hard, that's a really good start. And then
Yeah.
this learning about commitment, though, has made a huge difference in my life and in the lives of millions of people.
Yeah. No, I love that. It's something that you said too is, you fail, like, um, I think finding the right coach and the right fit and the right program, things that resonate with you. Um, it's interesting how things work. And there's been people that I've been exposed to that coach, like, and I'm going to take golf, right? Is I've got three good friends that are golf pros. And then I have a guy who's not really, I mean, we've become friends, but really didn't know him from Adam. They all have different kind of perspective on the golf swing. And they can all make me a better golfer, but there's one that I resonate with out of those four. And so what I would really,
Yeah.
the way that you get committed is you believe in the direction that you're going, right?
Yeah.
You believe that there's a purpose, like you said. And so, like, I encourage everybody to go to Robert's website, look at some of the information, and thank you for your kind offer. Check out the free stuff because you're gonna if you resonate with it, then you're gonna want to do more and find the fit for you. But we all need a coach, and it's like I don't know where the people in the audience need a coach. Sometimes you need a coach that's going to take you by your hands. Other coaches are going to teach you things that are going to help you keep on going. But along the way, Robert, you had to get some great advice. And I love. I'm 59. I love working with guys that are not just 35. Hey, I just kind of figured this out 2 years ago. Now I got this right. Like, because you got to go through the crap. You got to go through the failures. You got to get your nose broken a couple of times. So, what's the best advice that anybody's ever given you?
That you have a choice in life between having reasons and stories and excuses, or you can have results. Take your take your pick. It's one of the two. If I
I
catch
love
myself, and since I learned that in my 30s, um, if I catch myself giving stories, reasons, and excuses, I know I'm off track. I
it.
know
Right.
I'm not paying attention to my results.
Yep.
Results teach you everything you need to know about what you need to learn and what you need to adjust, what behavior you need to change, how you show up with people needs to shift. All of that information occurs to you. My book, Living an Extraordinary Life, is built around also the name of my previous company, ARC, ARC, Awareness, Responsibility, and Communication. That's another,
Mm,
actually, I'm answering your question with a second answer.
I
Is
love that.
when we were developing trainers in Japan, we would send them back to the U.S. because I can teach them a certain amount, but I sent them back to my teachers in the U.S. for a couple of weeks to learn more and to get deeper in our work. And that guy that actually invented the first of our sequential 3 programs in the personal growth side was Dr. John Enright. And he and a partner had started a training called ARC, ARC. And
Mm,
I had 3 separate companies then, a sales training company, a consulting company, and a training company. And I'm trying to build 3 brands in a foreign country with not that much money. I couldn't just throw cash at it. So I combined the 3 of them. I called the doctor, and I said, could I use that name? And he said, sure. It's an
right.
acronym for awareness, responsibility, and communication. It's what we teach. It's what I believe in. It's the best advice I ever got. Uh, and
Love it.
that wake up, notice what's happening around you, own it, whatever it is, own it, and then and it's particularly true today. Develop a mastery level of communicating, and in verbally, in writing, in listening, in body language, in every area of communication. You need mastery today. You've got to penetrate through this fog of distraction and other communications. People are trying to grab a hold of you and grab a hold of your customers and grab a hold of your staff. You better be a good communicator, a mastery level of communication. So
I
that's the
love that.
second piece of advice that's served me well.
That's great. Great advice. I love it. We'll put that in the show notes too. And all right, Robert, last question is, if God came down from heaven and only allowed you to retain the knowledge that you've received from one book that you've read, what would that book be?
Well, I'd like to say my book, so that would be self-serving. And really, the book is a master teacher of our time, and that's Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Love it.
A guy that came out of the horror of the camps. He's got a number on his arm, but he survived. And what he learned about surviving is also the key to thriving, which is if you've got a big enough purpose in life and you're committed to it, look out, world, here you come.
I love that you picked that book, and it's not surprising based on how you started this interview with your background and having an abusive, poverty-stricken background myself. Totally get that book, because no matter how bad you think you have it, I remember one time I was doing a speech, I was telling my story, and a lady that escaped Vietnam and was raped multiple times, was beaten, bones broke, all this stuff, and like abused for years. She escaped inside of a dresser, like that, like shipped inside of a dresser,
Wow.
and that's just a small piece of her story. But what it made me realize is, don't whine. However bad you had it, somebody's had it worse, and nobody cares. What I mean by that is, it doesn't matter, right? I mean, you can't change it. I love this saying, Robert, is I've given up all hope of a better past.
I love it.
Yeah. And I always remind myself of that if I'm ever thinking about that, or somebody brings something up and it triggers some kind of response. I always say, I've given up all hope of a better past. Would I wanted the Cosby Show or the Leave It to Beaver? Yeah, but I didn't get that. So you know what? Who cares? My future is always bigger than my past. And even when I'm 90, I believe that, because I could have one 24-hour period where I could influence billions of people. Who knows, right? So till the last day, I think my future is brighter than my past. So, well, thank you so much for sharing all of this wisdom. And I feel like we could go on for an hour here, but we're going to put all this stuff in the show notes, Heather, and the book. And I'm going to check out your book. I appreciate the free offer for the audience. When you get something of value for free, take it and then decide if it's something for you. And that's what I would encourage everybody. And Robert, you're going to love the way we end this show, because we end it the same way. with the incredible words of Earl Nightingale and The Strangest Secret, because what you think, you'll become.
Here's the key to success and the key to failure. We become what we think about. Now let me say that again. We become what we think about.
Thanks for listening to the Breakaway Wealth Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to this show wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. If you want to start increasing your wealth building ability right now, go to community.createtailwind.com to join our free online community and get access to free, in-depth training designed to help you build real, lasting wealth. See you next week.